If it wasn't for Africa, France would be 10,000 times deeper in trouble. There are at least 100 reasons why that is the case, but today I will dwell on 3. But first, let's see what French President Emmanuel Macron thinks about this.
Parce que si c'était pas la France, pour vous dire, vous seriez 10 000 fois plus dans la merde.
Clearly he disagrees. Macron's outburst is, however, a slap in the face of historical truth. So let me correct him and let's make sure that he sees this. If it wasn't for Africa, France would be 10,000 times deeper in shit. Here are 3 reasons why. Let's start with the CFA franc. Introduced in 1945, this currency system ties 14 African countries to France, giving Paris the enormous financial leverage over their economies. It's pegged to the euro, and African nations are required to deposit 50% of their foreign reserves in France's central bank. That's right, half of their reserves, forcibly parked in French accounts. France earns at least 500 billion euros every year from these reserves. This steady cash flow supports the French economy, funds French development projects, and props up the euro. Without the CFA system, France would face severe liquidity constraints, affecting its financial stability. Moreover, the fixed exchange rate of the CFA franc artificially deflates the 14 African economies and limits their ability to compete properly globally. In essence, these nations, home to millions living in poverty, subsidize the French economy. Here's the second reason why France would be in deep economic problems today if it wasn't for Africa. Africa's natural and mineral resources. France's economic development and industrial growth have long depended on Africa's vast natural wealth, especially in Francophone countries. For decades, France controlled massive amounts of uranium from Niger, oil from Gabon, bauxite from Guinea, and many more. Niger's uranium alone powers over 70% of France's nuclear energy, which in turn generates 75% of the country's electricity. That's not just dependence, it's survival. During the colonial rule and after independence, France secured sweetheart deals that ensured its companies retained control of these critical resources. For instance, Areva, now known as Orano, has been exploiting Niger's uranium under contracts that are outrageously favorable to France. Meanwhile, the average Nigerian lives on less than $2 a day. Between 2010 and 2020, Gabon's oil exports brought billions of dollars, but much of the profit lined the pockets of French multinationals like Total, rather than benefiting the local population. Imagine what France's energy and industrial sectors would look like today without African resources. We're talking about catastrophic shortages and economic instability. The third reason why France would be in deep economic problems if it wasn't for Africa is this: colonial taxes and debt. After African nations gained independence, France demanded what they called a colonial debt for the benefits of colonization. This absurd demand forced newly independent countries to pay billions in what amounts to extortion money. Guinea and Sékou Touré refused to comply, and France's response was brutal. They sabotaged Guinea's infrastructure, dismantled telecommunication lines, and even stripped office buildings of furniture. For countries that complied, the payments crippled their economies, while France used this money to rebuild after World War II and fund its post-war boom. Even today, the legacy of this economic stranglehold persists. France's grip on African economies through defense agreements, corporate dominance, and resource extraction ensures that these nations remain underdeveloped while Paris prospers. So, Mr. Macron, the resources, labor, and sacrifices of Africa have propped up your country for centuries. Without Africa, France would indeed be 10,000 times deeper in trouble. It's time to end the lies and acknowledge the truth. Africa doesn't need France. France needs Africa. As for Mayotte, our fellow Africans, it's time to demand for independence from France. You cannot continue being a mere department of France. We stand with you.